welcome to another episode of Butler's Babble, where we try to empower, motivate, and inspire everybody out there to live the best life that they can. Just a reminder that even though we are recording this, feel free to leave any comments or questions in the comment section there at the bottom there so that we can see them. We love to hear your comments on the show and what you enjoy about hearing on the show. And we also like to hear your questions because myself or our guests can always come back, look at it, and try and answer your questions the best we can at a later date. But don't be afraid to leave it down there. And if you're new to this station, if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to go down and subscribe and check the bell there so that you don't miss any other podcasts that we do here. And reminder, if you are listening to the audio version of this on Spotify or Google Podcasts or anything like that, just remember that sometimes we do show some clips on here, whether it be a website or some pictures. And unfortunately, you won't be able to see that on the audio version, of course, but you can go to the YouTube channel and you can see it on there at youtube.com/@ButlersBabble. So enough about that. Let's get to today's episode. We have an awesome guest for you today. She comes all the way, believe it or not, from Butler, Pennsylvania, which I thought was pretty funny when we first found that out. And she's a young lady that actually went through some struggles through childhood with a learning disability and with school, and even then back into adulthood, still had some little disabilities, learning disabilities going on there. But we're going to let her talk to you about it and get to know more about Michelle. So we're going to bring her in here right now. So Michelle Steiner, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, John. I certainly appreciate it.
No, I'm glad. We talked a few weeks back there to sort of get to know each other and see what was going on. And I'm glad we finally were able to get you on here and get the show done. So why don't we give everybody a little history on who Michelle is? Give us a little bit more background on where you're born and things like that.
Sure. Well, I was born in Butler, Pennsylvania, ironically, a small town just a little bit from Pittsburgh, about an hour from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I grew up with my parents and my brother. My mom worked in an office when I was growing up, and my dad was a maintenance man that worked in a steel mill.
Okay. Of course, in Pennsylvania, the steel mills, we all know Pittsburgh and steel mills. So that goes without saying. So what kind of a little child were you? Were you rambunctious? Were you an active child? Were you more recluse, more introvert? What kind of child were you growing up?
I think the kind of child I was growing up was, I grew up as an only child for 13 years. Okay. So my parents always said that I was around a lot of adult conversations when I was little. So part of that was hard to be able to socialize in school because I had a lot of ideas because I hung out with adults. So a lot of people thought that I was introverted. And I found it kind of hard sometimes to relate to other peers my age. So I was a little quiet. In fact, when I was in 5th grade and we did those awards where they had like superlatives that describe people, I had shyest girl. There wasn't an award for a shyest boy, but I think that what a lot of people didn't understand was I did want to talk. I was interested in things, but from a lot of the rejection with my peers, that kind of put me into my shell a little bit and maybe a little hesitant to sometimes speak. I was always a creative child. I loved to read from the time I was little. My dad would read to me every night, and I learned to love books, and I learned to love to write and do stories. And that was one of my favorite activities from the time I was really young.
That's very cool. I was probably the total opposite because I was the type that when it came to school English class and you had to read a novel, things like that, I hated that. And somehow I was able to pass those without even reading all the novels for some reason. I don't know. I just picked it up, I guess, from here and there. And so that wasn't me. And so you said that you and your brother, there was like a 13-year difference there. I didn't realize it was that big because I know my brothers were all 3 to 4 years apart from each other, except for my youngest. He was born a little later, of course, but he's still about that 6 years from my oldest. And then my daughters, they're both about 6 years apart. So 13's got to be a big change, that's for sure.
It definitely was. I mean, yeah, it certainly was. It's almost like we came from two different families in a sense, because by the time I was a senior in high school, he was starting out in kindergarten. So my parents were had one that was graduating and another one that was just beginning school.
Exactly. You're graduating high school, they're graduating kindergarten.
Yeah.
And but were you the big protective sister, of course, or?
I was. I babysat a lot. I took care of them. And when a lot of my friends would come over, we would hang out and try to include them in things as well.
Good for you. So, going through kindergarten, did you notice early on in kindergarten, did people realize that things were going on, or was it more when you got out of kindergarten and into grade 1, grade 2, that kind of thing? Or some of you struggling in your.
Right. I'm sorry. I was officially diagnosed when I was in kindergarten. I had a preschool teacher that thought some things were going on, but this is before they had a lot of early intervention services. And I was my parents' first child, so they didn't know a whole lot to base what normal development was. And they thought, okay, she'll go to school, she'll catch up. And when I got to school, I was really struggling with things like counting, tying my shoes. I can remember dot-to-dot pages were a big challenge for me. I would go and do a paper and thought, oh, I'm going to do great on this, and I would get it back, and it was not right. And my teacher noticed that, things just weren't. I was struggling with a lot of things, and recommended that I get tested for having a learning disability. And sure enough, after I was tested, we got the results back that I had one. They had call my parents in for a meeting, and they said she has a learning disability. And they knew one thing at that time that's been true. I wasn't going to be a mathematician. They knew that early on. I can also remember they didn't necessarily give a specific name for a learning disability at that point. It was just more of an umbrella term. You came in, you qualified for services, and the following year I had to repeat kindergarten in a new school in my district, and I began to have specialty instruction in the morning. I had an interesting setup with the school, though. I would come in for a first grade class, and it was like my homeroom, and then I would go off to learning support. And I would eat lunch with my first grade class, and then it was kindergarten in the afternoon. And a lot of my peers didn't understand what was going on, especially when we got the yearbook back, and I had two pictures in one in kindergarten and the other in first grade. But I can just remember the early years were really difficult for me, struggling socially and academically.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, grade 1, then you were, so take that back. So you're saying you're grade 1 in the morning, kindergarten in the afternoon. So when you finish that year, though, does that make you go to grade 2 then, or do you still now stay back in grade 1 for the rest of the
I was in grade 1 because the first grade 1 classroom was more just like I went in for homeroom and ate lunch with my first grade peers. But kindergarten was in the afternoon, and I was the incoming kindergarten class of that year that went to first grade. That was my first grade class.
Okay.
And I always had in the back of my head, I knew that they could hold me back. So that was always a fear that loomed in there every single time that I took a test or I didn't do well in a class. But it turned out to be a good thing that I knew that, because I always pushed myself a little bit harder to make sure my homework was done and that I was trying to do the very best I could, even if it was a class that I was struggling in.
Yeah, and this was like, I'm thinking, what, back in the 80s, I guess?
Yep, back in the 80s.
So back then it was a lot different too, because nowadays with mental health issues and with more, when learning disabilities are more predominant, where they are able to talk about it more often now and say, like, this is what's happening, that's what's happening. Back then it was just either if you didn't do something right, they would fail you and you repeated that grade. They didn't help you as much. So how much help did you get, like, with the school itself? Like, did they do some after school type things with you? Was it more during class where they would take you out of class and into another, say, special teacher to do stuff with, or?
Yes, I would have learning support. And in the very beginning, when I had the dual first grade and kindergarten, I would go to learning support where I was in all specialty instruction for reading, for math. I could read well, except I read well with expression. I know what the words meant. I could do that, but I just had trouble remembering what I read. My handwriting was never that great, so we worked on that, or we attempted to. And math was one of the ones we really tried to work on in the room. And eventually, a lot of those strategies started to work. So I was placed in more regular ed classes for reading and science and social studies. And along with being in the classes, I still was pulled out to be able to take a test, have the test read aloud to me, and to have that extra time to let my brain process the information.
Okay. And then, so you're doing regular classes at this time, like you said, science, English, in with all the regular students and that. But when it came to math, was it like a whole different curriculum than what the rest of your students were learning?
Yes, to a certain extent. In the very beginning, we were learning the basic things. It was just more, I had more repetition with things. I had things that were on my level. And eventually what ended up happening, though, is my class was able to move on, and I stayed to a certain extent with just not being able to pick up on a lot of the concepts. So then it just became what, in a lot of the situations, it just was individualized work that I could do. And whenever we tried to break away from that and put me on the same thing that maybe later on, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but when I was in 8th grade, I had a teacher that was learning sport. I was in math, and she wanted everybody to be on grade level, even when they were in learning support. And I truly was struggling. And she just kept on pushing forward and even said, well, when you go up to the senior high, there's no learning support classes. So they signed me up for a basic math class, and that did not work out well at all. And it wasn't until I was finally put in a learning support math that it was tailored to what I could do, not what a typical 9th grader could do, that I really started to be able to make progress, or at least be able to get through the class to satisfy the math credit.
Oh, definitely. So going back to, like you said, even in kindergarten, that you changed schools at one point. Was that because they felt this other school was going to be better for you, or was there a reason? Was it just because you guys moved or something? Was there a reason why you went from one school to the other?
At that time, I'm not 100%. That's what the school said, that they had the services provided. It was still it was still a public school within our district. That was the plan that they had. And that changed a lot, though, as years went on. There were classes for learning support. There was a learning support class that was added. And I think it was a lot of parents that advocated for that. And my parents, they just wanted me to get the services that I needed. And it did turn out to be a good thing, to almost be not with a lot of the students that were my neighborhood. That did turn out to be a better thing in the end.
Okay. And did you end up having to do, like, you're in grade 1, you're getting taken out from math to do other stuff? They end up sending a lot more stuff home with you to get done, or time on your side? Did your parents look at getting a tutor for you for some things? Was there other academically away from school that you had to do?
My parents didn't do tutoring outside of school. They didn't do a lot of services outside, but they would sit down with me every night, and we would do my homework, and we would study for tests. And sometimes it was tearful. It was really frustrating for both of us at times, but my parents didn't give up on me. They made sure that I tried my best. They didn't expect perfect grades, but I had to try. And they would still build that resilience with me. They would send me to school knowing that I studied really hard for this test, but they knew if it was a science class or a math, they knew that I wasn't going to do well, but they still made me go, take the test, and try to learn from that experience. And the same way when I struggled socially, if they knew I was having difficulty with a peer, I still had to go to school and had to build that resilience and be able to face the social situation.
And was it more the schools that were diagnosing you with your learning disability, or was there doctors brought in to look neurologically if there was something going on in there?
It was mainly the school psychologist that did that.
Okay. And so, and you told me earlier, but I'm going to let you say it, what the
Mhm.
learning disability was. I'm not even going to try and pronounce it again, although I like the way you said it better anyways. So what was that learning disability that they did? This was grade 1 when they diagnosed you with this, correct?
Right. And they didn't say that they didn't use the term, but I later found out that the math learning disability is dyscalculia or dyscalculia, depending on how you pronounce it.
Mm-hmm. And so now, did you find it later on that this is something that was very common through young children at the time?
Oh yeah, definitely. It is the same as dyslexia, which is the reading disability. It's 1 in 5 people have a learning disability. The thing that makes it seem like it's something that's rare is we have a stigma that when we look at learning disabilities, we think, oh, you must not be able to read or you can't learn. And the truth is, I'm a pretty strong reader. And I am able to learn. I just have to find the right way to do it. And we really haven't found a successful way to do that with math yet.
Okay. And now from grade 1, you said you told us about grade 8 with that one teacher and things going on, but between 1 and 8, going through school, this must have been very difficult on you, not just academically, but also socially too, because at that age, you're learning to meet new friends. You're learning more of a social aspect of life, of school, where before you start school in kindergarten, you're basically around your family, your neighbors, your friends that are told that they're your friends because they're friends of your family, either your cousins or whatever. But you go to school, and on top of academically learning, you're learning social aspects of your life too, how to meet new people, how to interact with new people and new children your age, and how to socialize with them. I'm sure this had a big effect in school, socializing with other kids.
It sure did. I can remember it was really hard for me to be able to identify if I was in my learning support classes. Most of the students that I went there with, they struggle with reading, and some of them came from some really bad home situations. So they had trauma and they had behavior issues, and they didn't think I was smart because I couldn't do math. And if I was in my regular ed classes, they didn't view me as a valuable peer that was smart. So they just lumped me together with the learning support, other learning support students. So that was difficult. And as a young child, it was hard. The bullying started pretty early on. But as as a young child, it was mainly, okay, you didn't get invited to a birthday party, or they don't want you to play with them at the playground, or somebody said, well, you're not my friend anymore, or little things like that. But whenever it got to be middle school and high school, a lot of the groups became more defined. And I just didn't feel like I fit in with any of them. And most of them didn't accept me either, and the bullying really did increase. So that was those grades 1 through 8 were really difficult for me socially. And as I went through high school, it got harder as well.
Yeah, because kids can be cruel, as they say, and they just pick up on things, and then they play off each other. And I'm sure one person starts making fun of you and doesn't like you, and next thing you know, their friends don't like you, and I'm sure the name calling started happening.
Yes.
And stuff like in gym class, I guess, where they're picking teams and nobody's picking you on the team. I mean, that's got to be hard. I mean, how did that affect you, not just socially, but also academically? Because did other grades, even though you were still doing well in stuff like science, English, and reading, did they start to suffer a little bit between everything that was going on around you? Or was that a solace for you, where you actually just delved yourself into everything else to try and forget all that other stuff?
It was difficult with academics too, but I was able to shut that out and just try to do the very best that I could do in my class. But I can remember even some of my the other regular ed peers. I think I was in a history class. It was 7th grade, and this was towards the beginning of the year. I got an A on an assignment, and one girl heard that I got an A, and she goes, "What? You got an A?" It's like, well, yeah, I'm able to get that. It not always, but I mean, if I put but I knew that I had to push forward, um, and be able to go through the classes academically. Gym class was really hard. I can remember one of the things with my visual perception and my eye-hand coordination is if you have a ball coming at me in my field of vision, I'm going to blink. And so I wasn't definitely a teammate, and nobody definitely didn't like having me on, with teams. We really didn't pick them, but they were picked for us. But so that was a real struggle for me to be able to do a lot of those things and to coordinate my body and to like gym class. That was really hard. I can remember as I grew up, the teacher figured out I like to be able to walk or do the exercise bike or lift weights. So a lot of times she would ask, I took her to my senior year, and she was afraid that I was going to get hurt during volleyball because we had some girls that they wanted to win. And she goes, do you want to ride the exercise bike? And I'm like, oh, okay. It took you 4 years to figure it out. But once we did that, I mean, the non-competitive stuff, I do enjoy, and I still love to do to this day.
No, that's good. Because you do have to find that sort of balance of how to get away from all that stuff and just psychologically, so you can deal with all that stuff too. So I'm glad that you were able to find something to do that with. Now, during all that time, was there at least one or two people that became close friends to you that you were able to finally find that friendship? Because I know we had one guest on once where he did, when he moved into a new neighborhood, he finally did have this one friend that lived nearby, and they didn't go to the same school, but that was when he went home. And even if he had trouble at home, that was one at least thing he can go and hang out with his friend. And that was kind of a normal life in that aspect.
Well, when I went to high school, I started to hang out with some people that were in an art group outside of my high school and a neighboring school. And I was able to shed the reputation that I had for all those years as being the outcast. And I found acceptance with a lot of those people. And we were involved with a newsletter and some other activities. And even when I did share about having a learning disability, some other people, they had them as well, and they understood. And even after that group, I wasn't able to be able to hang out. Our group just, everybody went their own way. I reached out to another group in the community, and it was a writing group. And 20 some years later, I'm still friends with these people, and we still have a writers group that meets once a month, and we've been a part of each other's lives, and we still hang out and are good friends. So that was definitely where I found my tribe. It wasn't with the homeschool district that I went to. I mean, I still do talk to a few people, but my real friends were my peers in school.
Okay. Nope, I can see that. And then so you're getting through middle school finally. You get into high school, and you say it was even tougher sometimes during high school. So you weren't doing stuff like teams. You weren't in any clubs, things like that. You just went to school and then home, or?
I had a few clubs that I did get involved with. Okay. I had a community service club that I like to do, and there was a couple other things that I got involved with clubs. But as I transitioned, I was hanging out more with my older friends that were already out of high school. And that kind of gave me that motivation to want to graduate and to just be more with them.
Okay. So socially, it didn't get any better, even going to high school. Because I know in my high school, it was a mixture of a lot of different middle schools were mixed together into one high school. So you're meeting new people, new friends,
right?
Things like that. Did it get any better socially throughout that whole time, or was it just basically the same as middle school?
It was pretty much the same as middle school. It got a little easier, but not that much. It was pretty much a lot of it's the area that I live in. It's a very small community. Not a whole lot of diversity. It's more if you fit into this mold that our community has, you're one of them, and if you don't, you're just simply not always accepted. So it got a little bit easier but a lot of that getting easier was being accepted by people outside of school and just looking ahead towards the future.
No, exactly. So you get through high school, you graduate, and which I'm
Right.
sure you were told a lot of times, oh, there's no way you're going to graduate, but I'm glad to see you did graduate. And you went into post school too.
I did. Now, that was the thing too. People knew that I was going to graduate because academically school got a lot easier, especially in high school. That was one thing that happened. The real problem that was going on was what was I going to do after school academically, because I knew I wanted to go to college, but I had a learning support teacher that said that she didn't think I could handle college and suggested a trade school. And that just didn't seem like the right fit for me. But thankfully, I had a wonderful student teacher that encouraged me. She told me I could go to college. I knew how to study. And sometimes her voice is the voice that I would hear when it got really tough at community college. And before I got there, I also was involved with an agency called Office for Vocational Rehabilitation, OVR. And we talked about, okay, college, what's going to be the possibilities? And they said, well, why don't you go to a community college for a few years and then you can go over to university. A lot of them look at how well you did. And before I could apply to go to college, I had to be tested for having a learning disability, again, to receive the funding. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a great test taker. And the psychiatrist who evaluated me said, you're most likely not going to go beyond a community college. Okay. And just hearing that was really difficult for me because I was already scared, and going into that class, I mean, just going into college, and I was pretty negative. And I had another professor that told me that I would have limited job choices once I got out into the field with my math. And a lot of people thought that using disability accommodations was giving me an unfair advantage. So I didn't use them for a while, and my grades really suffered for that.
But you went to community college then for a couple of years.
Uh-huh.
And what were you studying when you went to community college? Was there a major, or was it just a general arts type of thing?
I was studying early childhood education.
Okay. And then that was a couple of years. Mm-hmm. You graduated from there.
Yes.
And then what happened from there?
Well, from there, I was able to move out on my own. I had my own apartment, which was really in a central location, which was really nice because I'm not able to drive because my visual perception, that's in my brain, not in my eyes. And I was able to have that independence. I had a few temp jobs at some childcare agencies. And I always wanted more for myself, though. As much as I loved being independent and working with the kids, I just wanted more for myself. And due to financial reasons, I had to move back in with my parents, and my job downsized. And I thought, well, this is the time to just give university a try. I really researched them. I found a program that had the least amount of math and science possible, and was in a program that I loved. It was, they called it Community Programming for Americans with Disabilities. Now they call it Transition Specialist, but it's the service end of special education. Okay. And when I went there, I also utilized the services in the Office for Students with Disabilities. I had a note taker. I had extended test time. And when I did, and most importantly, I advocated for myself. I would go up to a professor that was new, and I said, hi, my name is Michelle, and this is what I need to be successful in the class, and explained that I had a learning disability. And most of them were so understanding. I had a few that maybe didn't quite get it, but that was all right. And I did so much better. I made Dean's List for a semester, and I was able to graduate with a bachelor's degree despite being told that's not something I could do. Yeah.
I love hearing stories where people prove others wrong. It's those stories where you tell me what I can't do, and I'm going to prove to you that I can do it. So I love hearing stories like that. So you got a bachelor's degree.
Yes.
And at this time, had you already met your husband at this time, or is this way
I
before school?
did. We were
Okay.
still dating. Yeah, we were still dating at the time. Yes, during that time when I was in school and not even focused on it, I fell in love. I can remember I was at an art center volunteering that night, and I was walking down the street, and he was driving down the street, and he saw me in a red dress, and he goes, "Oh, who's that girl? Where's she going?" And it turned out we were going to the same place. He was playing guitar that night, and we knew mutual friends. And this is something that we couldn't have planned. And we just got to know each other that summer. And he asked me out right before Christmas of that year. So that was our
Very
first
cool.
date.
Very cool. So you meet your husband. Now you get your bachelor's degree. Where does that take you from there? Like you get a bachelor's degree, what do you do from there?
It took me a while. I had a few jobs that just didn't simply work out. They weren't the right fit for me. A lot of some of the places I worked for claimed they were disability friendly, and it turned out to be they weren't quite disability as friendly as they were, and didn't understand a lot of my needs, and just some just weren't simply meant to be. And finally, I did go back to where I'm working at now, to school. And I thought, okay, I'm probably just going to get on the sub list. And to my surprise, they called me and said, we'd like to hire you on as a permanent para. So it took a while to be able to do that, but it was so worth it. I've been with my employer for about 12 years now, and I love being able to go in as a paraeducator and work with the students. I find it so rewarding, especially the ones that have disabilities, to go in, and sometimes it's like hearing a recording of myself at that age. I hate my learning. Yeah, I hate my learning disability. I hate my individual education plan. And I get that chance to tell them it's okay to have a learning disability. And that individual education plan is there to help you. And I also have a unique perspective that I can look at them and I can share information on how to advocate for themselves. And I think that's just so important, because for a lot of my students, their disability isn't going to leave them when they graduate. And I think it's important to get a good foundation on how we advocate and ask for help as early as we can.
Very true, because I think it's a very good position for you to be in, because you've been there for, like you said, like what a lot of these kids are going through. You've been there, and so it's not like just a teacher just saying, "Oh, don't worry, it's going to get better," or this, and they're just talking, trying to be nice to them or trying to explain. You can say, "Hey, I've been where you've been. I know
Yep.
what you're going through. This is what you can do, and look at me. I was told I can do this, and look what I did, and look where I am now." So you can do. I think it's very good for their psyche too, because they have somebody they can turn to that's been through it, and so I think it's a very, very, very good spot to have you in, and so I'm glad that you're doing that. And it's funny because I was looking at it, it says Butler Area District School, and it just find that funny. But no, I'm glad. And so you're doing that, and then your husband, what's he doing?
He works. My husband works for Armstrong Cable, so he's a technical person for a call center. So people call up when their internet isn't working, and sometimes when their cable isn't working as well.
Okay, so you get married. You don't have any children, but you do have cats and
We have
dogs or
two.
something.
Yeah, we have two cats, Jack and Sparrow. So, yep, we love them, and it's International Cat Day. So,
perfect. And so now that's not the only thing. Like I noticed going through your website and that, because you do have a website.
yes.
You started to get into photography a lot too. Was that more of a release for you, or is that just something you picked up on the side, or?
Well, I do photography, and that kind of came as a surprise to me, because I can remember I had a dear friend that told me, you can do like art. And I told him, I can't do art. I can't draw. I can't paint. I'm not very good at that. And he kept encouraging me. And people would notice things about my pictures. I can remember I had an older woman that looked at a picture that I took at prom of a tree. And she said, that really shows perspective. Now, when I showed my peers the pictures, they said, why did you take a picture of a tree? They didn't understand it. They couldn't see that, but other people could. And I remember I was also at a wedding years ago, and my husband and I turned it into a little trip where we went to a cemetery, and I took a picture of an angel. And I had a friend that saw that, and she said, that's really good. And this was a friend that was really hard to please. So if she saw it and thought it was good, I thought, okay, this is something interesting. And I remember I entered it into a show, and I think I got honorable mention. And during this time, I also started writing about having a learning disability. I can remember I had a friend that told me, you really should write about having a learning disability. And I said, that's a little personal. I don't think I want to write about that. And I think I wrote some bad poetry and some other things instead. But when I finally got that first article published on The Mighty about my struggle with limited hand dexterity and opening up a lock, I just will never forget that was one of the most healing things I've ever done. And that encouraged me to write more articles. And I just found so much more of a connection with people that I didn't expect. And I started my own blog. And I also started to turn the photography into picking up on those details that other people missed. My husband is the one who takes me a lot of places because I'm not able to drive. And I'll be in the car with him and I'll say, did you see that? And he'll be like, no, I'm driving. And I see a flower, or I see a sign. And a lot of times I get that chance to go back there on one of my walks, and I'll take that picture and I'll put it on my website. And a lot of times I'll do that with my blog articles. Nature's a big thing. I'll do a lot of metaphors where I'll describe parts of nature to having a learning disability. And I'll get a chance to put my flower on there. And I also have them available for a print as well. I have prints for sale on my store, and I have notebooks and a mug as well. And so I have that. And there's also a forum where we talk about different things, and we have different topics where people can talk about having a disability. The theme for this month is traveling with a disability, and I have a question up there, where we can share like travel tips and things like that. And I just want to have this where people can connect and be able to share what life is like, not only for myself, my experience, but what the experience is for other people as well.
Yeah, and I'm noticing that there's your blog that people can go to. Mm-hmm. And if people want to go to michellesmission.net, that you can go to. And a lot of out there, it's got a little bit about you too, about your dyscalculia. That's how you said it. And but it talks about a little bit about you, some pictures of you there, which people can see, and your blog's on there. And I noticed you got a lot of entries started like 2020, I think it was. And now when you talk about your blog, are these just things that come to your mind? You just want to write them down, or are these thoughts that you have, or stories, or is it just a mixture of everything?
It's a mixture of everything. Sometimes I will do works like with having the travel series where I'll talk about traveling with a disability. Other times I might take a quote, or I might something in nature I'll see, and I'll be able to write about that, or a prompt. And I just take that idea and I try to break it down and analyze it with the perspective of having a learning disability, and make it easy for people to understand that have disabilities, but also for people who don't have disabilities to be able to understand as well.
No, I think that's awesome. And like I said, you have your photography part there, and it's got a lot of samples on there. But then, like you said, you can go to the store. It's got a lot more samples there of different photographs that you have. They said some notebooks, journal that they can use to write in, your mugs in there. A lot of decent stuff in here that they can go. And I'm looking at your photographs, and like I can see people blowing that up and putting them in their walls in their houses. And I don't see why it would just brighten it up, because they're very bright, very abstract in some cases, and a lot of close-up photography, I find.
Yes.
and then it's also got a list of different podcasts that you've been on.
Yes.
So if they click on that, it shows you different ones that you've been
Right.
on to talk about your disability, I guess, and disability in general, I guess.
Yes.
And so they can click on those and check those out. And then you've got press here. So what is your press one here?
My press is some other links for other places that I've been published on, such as the Mighty, which is the one on top. I have a lot of articles. So if you click on that or the read more, you can find my articles that have been published on the Mighty. And then I also have Word Gathering. I've had some pictures that have been published there in different issues. And Nonverbal Learning Project. Those are some of the other places that I've been published as well.
Very cool. And people can contact you through this site, I take it, in the contact. And now, do you also do like speaking engagements? Do you do things to talk to the public and that?
I do speaking engagements on podcasts. That's been the main source. I have spoke at a disability symposium right before COVID hit. And I also had a women's empowerment breakfast that I spoke at as well. And I'd love the chance to also speak on more podcasts, but also to have in-person events as well.
No, definitely. Have you ever thought about going back to school? Anything else that you'd like to learn, or any other? Because I can see you doing stuff like social work and stuff for people, and or psychology, things like that. Because I think you'd be good at that. Because you're a very good speaker. I can see you talking to public and trying to help people through things. Has there been ever a thing that you said, you know what, maybe I can go back and do this, or another job you'd like to, or are you just happy where you are now?
I'm just happy where I'm at now. I mean, if the cards are ever on the table for me to go back to school, I would definitely be open for that. But right now, I'm happy with working in the school with the students that I work with. And I love being able to connect with other people through my blog and to be able to do stuff like that.
That's awesome. Do you have anything coming up in the future that you'd like to talk about?
Well, one of the things that has happened I have a book that's on Amazon that I had 3 stories that were published in it. That's definitely called Rediscovering Your Story, and it's available on Amazon. And I definitely just want to keep on expanding the blog and just being able to share my story and be able to help connect with other people who have disabilities.
So Rediscovering Your Story, did you write it, or is it just you got some stuff put in a book that somebody else put together?
I got something that was somebody else put together. I went to a workshop in the last fall where we had different prompts that we would write about. Some of them were fun prompts, like we were prompts about our hair. That was one of the stories that got in there. And then there was other ones that I wrote about one of the most important lessons that I ever learned, and that was accepting my disability. And there was another one we had the chance to describe our favorite place. And the goal of that was to look at your story and to get a different perspective on events that have happened in your life. Okay. And everybody has something. Yeah.
Rediscovering Your Story, Expressions of Grace and Gratitude on the Path of Recovery. I take it that's
right. Yeah.
So I'm seeing it on Amazon right now.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, there was a lot of people that were in my group. It was a NAMI group, so we had some mental health. Some people had addictions, and myself, I didn't experience either one of those, but I did have to go through some growth with having a learning disability, and I certainly have had a different perspective on it than I did years ago.
No, that's great. I didn't know about the book. That's really good. I'm going to have to get a copy of that. That's for sure. So I can read not just yours, but everybody else that's written something in there too. As you can see behind me, I've got a collection of books that are on my shelf there that are all from past guests.
Oh, so, awesome.
I try my best I try to support you guys whenever I can. Whenever I have a guest on here, I want to show my support, and I always try and purchase a book. I don't like people just sending me a copy. I like to purchase it because I want to help you out.
Good.
And it all started with my very first guest, Carrie Lee Brown. She wrote a book, and I brought her on the show. And ahead of time, I had written a book from her. I paid for it, and then she shipped it all autographed and signed for me, personal note in it, because we were good friends from way back when. So I always try and help you guys. I haven't read them all yet. I'll be honest with you. I'm not like you, where I could just sit down and read. I've written I think 2.5 of them so far. So we're getting there. I got about 5 of them back there. So yours will add to the collection, and I will get to it.
Okay.
But no, I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to have to purchase it, and then I'll have to ship it to you and get you to sign it or something.
Yes.
That's awesome. No, I'm glad to hear about that. So before we go, last words you'd like to say to everybody before we log off here?
I would just like to tell everybody to know what they want and be able to find a way to do it. And sometimes success comes in a package that's different than what you expected, but a lot of times it's even better.
I couldn't put it any better than that. Well, thank you very much, Michelle, for joining us today. It was a very knowledgeable, I learned a lot on this, stuff that I didn't know about before. I even learned more about you, even though we had that interview a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
I learned a lot more about you today, and that's great. That's what this show is all about. And I'm glad that you were able to get through all that and that you're still working through it, but you're still not letting it get you down. You're just moving along, and you're showing that you're strong enough that you can leave it behind and say, it's not going to tackle me. I'm going to go after it. So I'm very happy that you came on today. Thank you very much for being here. And hopefully we can get you back on again in the future and find out more about what's going on in your life and get some updates from you.
I would love that.
That would be great. So thank you very much. Thank you, everybody else, for watching. Be sure to tune in again on our next episode when we bring on another person with another story to help try and inspire, motivate, and empower you to live your best life. And until then, just remember, if anybody asks, say the Butler did it.